I'm Wendy Desabate from St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I currently live in Miami, or wherever my passport lands me. I love supporting others in learning how to live their best lives.
I'm Derek Lumpkins, a Boston-born globetrotter and photographer with the soul of a polyglot.
As lifelong friends, we're constantly talking about history, the arts, missed opportunities, and the road less traveled.
Welcome to Things They Don't Teach Us,
a podcast about life's tips, tricks, and insights.
Hey.
Hey.
What's going on?
Oh, it's another wonderful day in Miami. The sun is shining. There are no birds singing, but you get the point.
There are no birds singing?
I hope not. No, I'm in the city. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, as you know, I'm still in Barcelona. We do have birds here. We have parakeets. They don't exactly sing. They kind of just squawk.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the sun is shining here, but no birds are singing. So, I want to give
today's conversation. I'm sorry.
I want to give you props for picking out this topic because, it seems like such an obvious one, but again, it's something that we're taught not to talk about.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the things they don't teach us to do after being fired.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's sort of like, I think the common advice is, just dust off your resume and go look for something new.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's more than that.
Yeah. There's a lot more to it. And the higher up you go in terms of management and what have you, the more you have to remember, as far as health insurance, and I'm sure tons of other stuff that our guests will talk to us. But I have to ask her, have you ever been fired?
Yes, I have been fired.
Ooh,
have you been fired?
I've been fired, yes.
I was in Japan. I was between jobs and I found this little freelance thing teaching English. And I was living in a part of Osaka. I think it was in Osaka. And I had to travel to the other side of Osaka. It was really far. It was like a good hour just to travel there by a couple of trains. And I really didn't enjoy it. The employer didn't really set me up with a good understanding of what it was, what I was supposed to do. I didn't have any materials or resources. So I was kind of just winging it. And after a couple of days, she sent me this email. She was a couple of times. She sent me this email saying, "Oh, you don't have to come in now." I'm like, "Oh, are you sure?" Because I'm getting ready to go. She's like, "No, you don't have to come in now. We're gonna send you your final check." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I guess this means I'm not working here anymore." But it was such a relief. It was such a relief. So I really didn't like that job.
Yeah.
I didn't like the commute.
Yeah.
The pay wasn't worth it. Like I was spending almost as much per week just getting there as I was getting in the paycheck.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I did that they don't teach us was I went out, had drinks, and had a nice meal. I mean, I know that's probably not what our guest is going to tell us to do after being fired, but that's the first thing I did. I was like, I'm celebrating this.
This is why we're friends. I had a job working in marketing in a company, and the manager and we just did not gel well together. He was just a dictator, and that doesn't vibe with my personality. So one day he calls me to the office about 3:00 in the afternoon, and goes to tell me like all this like drama that I'm being fired. I perked up and I was like, "You're firing me on a Wednesday, which is fine, but why did you wait till 3:00? Why didn't you tell me this at 10:00 when I came in this morning? Save me the whole day." I scurried out that office, went to my desk, did one of those little dramatic sweeps where I took everything that was on my desk, which wasn't much because I already had another job lined up. So I was going to give them 2 weeks notice anyway. I just hadn't gotten my final paperwork in, but I swept everything off my desk, and the girls in the office, they're like, "What's going on? What's going on?" I just looked at them and said, "I'm fired, bye." And I too want to have drinks and celebrate it.
So we'll see if our guest, who by the way works in HR, we'll see if our guest approves of our methods.
Yes, I know. She probably gonna get the tuck. Anyway, so today's guest is Cecilia Akufo. Cecilia has over 10 years of experience in human resources and employee recruitment, first as a technology and high-tech recruiter, and currently in higher education as a talent acquisition specialist. Cecilia's role involves advising faculty and staff on hiring practices, counseling, supervisory concerns, and conflict management. Cecilia is currently a communications professional in higher education. What did I say? She has a master's degree from Northeastern University in journalism and has worked as a freelance journalist. She also has a master's degree from Suffolk University in adult organizational learning with a focus in human resources management. In 2021, Cecilia launched an 8-episode podcast to shed light on employment practices not discussed and not widely known by workers. This podcast is titled Workplace Fairness and Dignity. It's published on podcast host Buzzroot, and we'll also have a link for anyone after the show. Welcome, Cecilia.
Hello, good to join you both, and I enjoyed hearing the backstories you both shared, so that was great.
Do you approve?
I do. I mean, there's so many ways to experience that, that what happens, that firing. But what I would say is it's the first thing I thought is it's really good when you have a good feeling. When you've been fired, it's a good sign. It means that it's the best thing that ever happened. So I just want to be clear that I'm not in HR right now, but I worked in HR and recruiting for 10 years. And in my HR responsibilities, I was the person that the HR folks that were working on a severance, they would refer people to me to look for other positions within the university to help folks that they knew were going to be cut, to help them look within the university, or even in corporate. When I was doing corporate recruiting, I helped people right after they had a severance, whether it was a firing or whatever. And so I could guide them on what they should do about finding their next opportunity. So that's what I would say.
Perfect. Yes.
All right. Nice.
So the other thing, and please, I'm a talker, so if you need to get questions in there, I won't be offended if you cut me off. But, I'm hearing you, and I would say a lot of people have gotten fired, especially, I feel like there's still a mindset of, people working in a job for 30 years and, retiring with a pension and all of that. And we tend to think that old template still applies, and it doesn't. Some of us know better, but so as people move within, people are more afraid, are less afraid to take risks. People are moving jobs every 5 years or so. At some point, you're going to bump into a situation that leads to a manager, an interaction with a manager not liking you, because that's all it takes. It's not, we're trained to think people are fired for cause. In my experience, maybe 2% of people are fired for cause just because they really deserve it. And then there's another, 15%, and these are my numbers based on my experience. Another 15% are, what was the term I wanted to use? It's like a conflict. It's not a good fit, right? So when I say it's not a good fit, it's just not a good job match. And that I would blame on the folks who are doing the hiring. But it doesn't matter when you're the person on the other end. Everything else is somebody just doesn't like you. They don't like you. And they don't like you means that they see your tattoos and they don't like your tattoos. They want to tell you how it's going to be, not necessarily for the job, just because that's how they're used to doing it. And they have power. You need to accept the power that they have. And if you don't, you're not a good fit. So there's that. There's a lot more of that that I've seen. And at the end of the day, the person with more power is the one who's going to win.
This is true.
And so that's what HR doesn't tell you, because it's not in their interest, is, if it's a peer-to-peer issue, it's more of a level playing field. But if it's an issue where you go to HR about, a boss, unless they're doing something blatantly illegal, and and by illegal meaning, that's not illegal. Harassment isn't. Having a bully for a boss is not illegal. Having a harassment is not illegal. Screaming at you is not illegal. What is illegal is putting it in writing that that's the reason that they're doing that. So that's what they don't tell you. So we don't have fairness laws here. We have illegal is breaking the law, and again, it's really hard to prove. And HR's job is to get you gone as soon as possible so that you don't kick up a stink.
So actually, you're getting me to the question I want to ask. So,
yeah.
We're looking at this episode as things they don't teach us to do after being fired. But while we're here at this point, what are things that they don't teach us to do at the moment of being fired? So when you're at that moment where they're saying, we're letting you go, you're laid off, you're redundant, whatever it is, you just said HR wants to get you out the door before you can kick up some dust. But, in your experience or, in terms of how you would advise people, like what are things that they don't teach us to do at the very moment that that's happening?
They have the upper hand. There's not a lot in that moment that you can do, because at the end of the day, once a decision is made, it's made. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. My partner says, at the moment that they put you on a performance improvement plan, that's your 2-week notice to look for a new job. That's really any negotiation is going to start. Most people don't have that option. If they really want you gone, that might be the time to pitch can we talk here? Like I'm willing to walk out the door if you do this, that, or the other. It really depends. So, you can give it a shot, but at the end of the day, once they decide you're going to go, you're going to go. And at that moment where you find you're fired, nothing you say is really going to matter.
Yeah.
That it happened to me. I got a great review and I was fired a month later. And it was because my boss was inappropriately abusive in a way that at the time I had a family member that was in the middle of a divorce and their spouse was doing the same things my boss was doing. And there was no way I was going to accept that. And so I got the good review, but again, they can fire you for any reason at the end of the day. So what I did in that moment, I reiterated, she said it wasn't a good fit. I said it was a good fit, but I would do again what I did before, which is speak up, because if nobody speaks up, nothing changes.
True.
So they had the letter and everything. They got it to me. I literally got a 15-minute warning, not even a 15-minute, hey, can we meet by? So my point is, not everybody will do that, but I knew enough to know it was already in writing, and anything you're going to do is going to come after. Any complaints you're going to file, any of that. But, in terms of health insurance and things like that, every state is so different. Where I live in Massachusetts, health insurance, you're required to have the health insurance. And so there's an exchange that you want to become a part of really quickly. And there's, COBRA and paperwork, and the HR will help you with those things.
Okay.
That they will do. So they'll usually, because their job, that's where their paperwork comes in, the bureaucrats that do HR. But their job, unfortunately, is not to save your job. So
yeah.
So you don't recommend that question. You don't recommend like the dramatic sweep out the door or like the fiery speech at the end. Like you don't recommend those things, or do you? I don't know. You didn't really address either one of those.
Okay, the fire sweep out the door, and what was the other thing?
The dramatic sweep, or the fiery speech.
This is what I would say. I always say keep it classy. You can do that. It's gonna fall on deaf ears. The other thing you want to do is they still have some power over you. So you do want to maybe anything you tell them is going to give them information about what you may be coming back to do. So, if you really want to make a statement, you can do it in a letter after. I wouldn't do it at that point because they know everything, and it might make you feel better, but it might also poison the waters because you might have to come back to them for something. You just might. So I do think it's helpful to, at least for the HR professional, just keep it civil. Yeah. I think the less you say, the better. Anything you're going to say, you've said before. For example, in that situation that happened with me, with the boss, the HR lady, I've talked about this on my podcast, but she had tears in her eyes because everybody that worked with me knew the kind of work that I did. And the boss was the problem, but she had the power. And this lady got dragged, and she was the person. I didn't lay into her. The few words I wanted her to hear. And she was the one who mailed my box of stuff to me, you know? So even if it's small, you're going to you don't want to alienate the people who have to do their job.
So you've gotten fired. And I guess with unions and non-unions, a little bit differently, but what are your first suggestions? So do you reach out to unemployment? Do you, I didn't do that because I had another job lined up. Or I guess I'm lost. Like, what do you do after that? Are there resources available for people who have no idea what to do?
Excellent. So unemployment is the first thing. You know, one of the best things that can happen to you, I hate to say it, this sounds weird, but in my mind, reach out to unemployment. I've had friends who were terrified of getting fired, so they were trying to look for a job. I said, no, make them pay you. So that way you can find the next best thing. So yes, reach out to unemployment. And I do counsel people. I said, you did not do anything wrong, which is going to be part 2 of our conversation.
So let's say there's like underlying drama in your job, and you know that you could feel the bell moving. It's better to get fired than to quit.
I think so. And that's what I've told friends, and everybody I've told that it's worked out better for.
Okay.
They're
surprised by that. I'm super surprised by that because I was working hard. So my last job, I hated my last job, really just hated my last boss. And so I was really trying hard to avoid being fired. And I did talk to you. You didn't say, go ahead and get fired. It was like, wait, now you're telling me this? I could have gotten paid for that? So yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about why that's better.
I remember those conversations. Now I'm going, wait, no, just kidding. No, so 2 things. Derek, you're a unique individual. Wendy, I have so much, I hold Derek in just incredibly high esteem. And I know that, Derek, you're not someone that you're going to be okay all the time, right? Yeah. So, and you have the confidence, you have the skills. I know, right? That's not helping. And I remember what we talked about, and you had so many irons in the fire, something was going to work. Ideally, for me as well, like I'm able to do things, not because for different reasons. I know how to, because of my background, I just know how to get a job really quickly. And there are certain things in my life that allow me to make decisions where I can say something like, speak out in a way that it's like, I don't have to take this. A lot of people do, to be fair.
Yeah.
So I have counseled friends. They're the ones doing something wrong. You make them pay you. And once we get to, they're worried about being humiliated. What's the worst thing can happen? You're embarrassed. So they have unemployment for a bit, and they take some time to look for their next thing. It does take longer, but you have to be willing to do that. So that's one thing. 2 different kinds of folks. So get the unemployment. You can, first thing a lot of people want to do is get a lawyer. Chances are, again, unless it's incredibly obvious, it's really hard to prove that folks broke the law. You can file like some sort of ageism, it's, sexism, whatever, but that's where that is. Do unemployment and take your time looking for your job. So after that, I want to make sure that we finish the topics here, but after that, in terms of the search, I'll also, talk about that. I think that I'm going to assume most people don't have the option of just, they really need the job and all of that. So you've done everything you can, but, you've been targeted for whatever reason. If you know that you're going to be fired and all of that, try to, that 2-week notice or whatever, try to get all your, the PIP, try to get all your ducks in a row, look at the health insurance, COBRA, and just, look at your policies and see what else. You can even have a conversation with the HR person, say, if I get fired, I'm doing my best to really turn this around, and I really like this company. I'm looking forward to sticking around. But if that doesn't work out, which I understand is a possibility, can you tell me, what I should be looking at? And another reason to not tick people off, because they can ideally give you guidance if they're competent.
Yeah. So here's another question. What's the difference between being fired and being laid off, fundamentally speaking?
There are people that consider them the same thing. But, in a real world, being laid off, people that you're looking for a job from look at that a little bit more kindly, because it does happen, than than a firing, because people are conditioned to think everything's for cause, even though they know better. So the difference between a layoff could be for any reason, but some people will be like, well, if you're so good, why? But that's a mindset anyway. And it's not legitimate, but there's a lot of non-legitimate mindsets out there. So the layoff is really, not your fault, but it could be a way to people think, oh, well, they got rid of you, but that was her. The firing, is probably more, the term is more fraught with conflict.
Is there such a thing?
Go ahead, Derek. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, is there such a thing as an employment permanent record? So the way we have credit reports that track your history over time, is there such a thing somewhere that's like an employment permanent record or employment record of that type?
That is such a great question. I wish the world isn't that well organized in that way. It's very fractured, and it's according to company, and it depends on how big. I work for the state. So that particular firing. So I'd worked for the state before, so I had, an excellent track record. And again, I had a concern that the vindictive boss that I had might want to put a permanent record, like when you're looking at a computer system. So if you work there were 50,000 employees in the state, that just gives you an idea. So there could be some sort of a flag or a red flag, but that's one employer, but they're not all, no. And if take a smaller organization, like let's just say a financial company, right? Like say Bank of America, I'm just picking one. Their HR system, if it's connected, they may have something in like a general HR. I don't know how it works. Or it might just be, local according to each hiring unit. Let's put it that way. So it really varies. Yeah. So what my employer now, the university, there was a time where, hiring was done. And I think that other local universities hiring was done according to the local unit, but then they got a new system that made it, certain people can see at certain level, things like a flag, but everyone can't see that, just designated people. So individual units can't see things, but the people at the highest level of the HR unit have access, but to see any notes that are being made, but nobody has access to look at everybody that's applying to such a big corporation, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I worked for a hotel chain once, and I left before my sort of your vetting, your seasoning time. I think it was like 3 months or something, 3 or 6 months. And they made it very clear, because I left before that would, if I ever went to work with them again, I would not be allowed to work with them again, which I was fine with. But
yeah.
And I thought it was more of a threat than it was like to get me to change my mind, than it actually was a fact, because it didn't make sense to me. Like, I'm here, but if I went to in Massachusetts, where I lived at the time, if I left that chain and I went to work at the same chain, the same brand in South Carolina, like I doubted they would know. Like it just didn't make sense to me, but I think it was a threat.
I agree. I had that experience too with a 3-month thing. And it was like, well, you'll never, be able to work here again. And at the time I bought it because I was fairly young in my, but knowing what I know now, it's like, okay, maybe chances are there are lots of reasons why that might not apply, so.
So now here's another challenge. You're in a situation working where you're not, you're not happy being like Derek was. What do you recommend for people to do? Should they get themselves fired? Or should they, while you're job hunting?
I love that question. Then I wouldn't say get yourself fired, because then it's for cause, right? Yeah. So, then they have a reason. Then you've given them the reason. What I would say is this. My experience was that I think the boss knew at that point. She knew she hadn't shown me who she was. What happened was, COVID happened, great record. Everybody's great. COVID happens. We go out of the building and we're working from home. So she had less eyes on her. So she could kind of, people wouldn't see what she was doing, and then she could be who she was. And when that happened, where she wasn't trying to keep up appearances anymore, and she knew who I was, that, she sort of let it all hang out and just engaged in behavior that I'm pretty sure she knew would be unacceptable to me. And at that point, I'm going to respond to let her know it's unacceptable behavior and it's inappropriate. Yeah. So you can go understand, and I'm making a point with this, but, my colleagues later, every single one of them apologized. When they knew that, they said, once, they said, we knew that you were not going to tolerate that, but we wish that we had told you who she was so you would know. I said, and just to, how to deal with her. And they said, it's never going to be acceptable to me. So it doesn't really matter, even though I appreciate that you care. Yeah. So at that point, I'm not trying to get myself fired, but I am saying you won't speak to me again. So she's like, if I can't talk to you like this, then it's not going to work. So in that case, it's not for cause, but you've made a decision. So you have to know, I guess, what you're willing to live with. But I wouldn't create a situation where I'm doing something wrong.
Well, we've all heard that classic line where someone goes, someone say, you're fired, and the person, the person go, I quit. Oh no, go ahead and fire me, that way I can collect.
Oh, I've never heard that. That's pretty good.
Oh, it's no joke.
It's pretty good.
No.
What's that?
Yeah. The line from The Nanny when he tried to fire her, and she's like, I quit. There's no, go ahead and fire me because that's what I can collect.
I love that show. I mean, I have had friends be so happy they got fired. And again, it's telling you something, Yeah. They're just like, oh my God. And I've had folks say thank you for, even when at first they're like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. I'm like, don't you quit. And they're like, I'm so glad I listened.
I had a situation where I worked for a financial institution, and I was miserable, absolutely miserable, like coming home in tears, miserable. And I didn't, at the time, I did what you all do. I got sick of it and I quit. But then someone told me, he's like, I should have went on a mental health break. I didn't know that was a possibility.
I've been hearing more people do that. It's not always easy to do, but I can't speak enough to that because that's really a leaves thing, benefits and leaves, and that's not my expertise. But I've seen more people do it, and have had friends do it legitimately and come back. But I will say I have had friends in the position of being the person to grant leaves and paperwork, and the manager just makes it, the organization just makes it really difficult for the folks to get. So by the time, they really need it, by the time they get to the to the other side and get it approved. So, so that's what I would say.
Switching back to once you've been fired. So I'm thinking about where the economy seems like it could go in the next couple of months, where, they're trying to slash the federal workforce. And that is having ripple effects in the private sector. So I have friends who work in the private sector who are saying they should get ready for layoffs. So it sounds like tens of thousands of people could potentially, and again, I'm not an economist, but just what I'm hearing and seeing, it seems like tens of thousands of people could potentially be facing firings, laid off, unemployment, whatever. How would you counsel them to distinguish themselves, to set themselves apart from the pack?
So I will definitely answer that question. The other thing I want to make sure I mention too is references, which is another thing after being fired. I don't know that I have an answer for that. What I would say is that's what you're always doing when you're looking for a job anyway. I'm sorry to state, I know you already know that. I don't know how people can really distinguish themselves, because the first thing I thought when you said that is, I'm going to use the term gutting, of the federal workforce, which is probably going to translate to the private sector. And the first thing I thought is, think about the strain on unemployment, right? So that's going to be its own crisis in my mind in it itself. Is it prepared for that many people being in the on labor force, for lack of a better word? The best thing someone can do is really the thing that I say when people are applying for jobs. This is the best thing I can say just to each individual. As a recruiter, one of the things I learned as a high-tech recruiter, I learned this, they were phenomenal. So many people had so many of the same skills. They would list their resume. When you're looking at thousands of resumes, what we always tell people is, when you're looking at thousands of resumes, you scan each one and it takes 3 seconds. The thing that most most recruiters say, and I say it when I'm giving talks, is it takes 6 seconds. It's really 3. So you just don't have that much time to spend individually. And people will say, recruiters
it takes 3 seconds or 6 seconds for what exactly?
When you're looking at 1,000 resumes for however many jobs you're managing, it takes 3 seconds to know whether somebody is right for, or you take 3 seconds to know whether they're in your in pile, your maybe pile, your no pile. To get in the in pile, or at least the maybe pile, have your resume. It is, if you're applying to a lot of jobs, you have general resumes. If there are jobs you really want, you fine tune that. But the best thing you can do, which I learned from the high-tech recruiters, is to put your qualifications, which means requirements for the job, not what they're asking you to do. What they say you have to have, put it in 4 or 5 bullets, 4 bullets at the top of your resume qualifications, so that it hits them. It takes them a second, and it's in the in pile or the maybe pile, in terms of if you're right for that job. So that's the best way to distinguish yourself, because a lot of people, I will say, in recruiting, they'll tell you, and people always talk about what they've done in their cover letter and in their resume. They're not answering. You tell the company what you're going to do for them. Okay. So that's a cover letter. They don't really care about your experience unless you have a 1-sentence example of how you're doing this thing that they're asking you about. Again, it's all about them. And for the resume, it's like so many people in high tech have the same skills. The only way they could distinguish themselves is, for this job, this is what I can bring you. And, everything else was like a general resume. And I found that so powerful. And that's how you distinguish yourself, because everybody else is sort of doing the same thing. At the end of the day, you're either qualified for a job and you're not. And if a lot of people are applying for a job, the best thing you can do is present yourself in a way that you get looked at, and then let the process play out. I don't know if I answered that question in terms of, yeah.
Yeah, you did. You're actually leading me to another tangent of that, which is it worth it to join groups on LinkedIn or meetup groups or other networking things? Is it worth it to do that as well? Because you hear the thing like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So is it worth it to get into like different networks or to expand your networks while you're in this interim period in order to try to meet new people or people who can connect you?
I mean, I don't think that hurts. I think it depends. Some people are all about the social networking, and that's been traditionally recommended. It's not my personality. I'm a social person, but I tend to it doesn't hurt. Okay. I think the most important thing to do to me is to be looking for the job. And it's against orthodoxy, which, I don't think it's bad, but a lot of people don't really feel like they have the energy or the desire, and that's okay too. I've gotten a couple of jobs from folks I knew, one from someone in grad school and one from a colleague at my old job that recommended me. What she did was said, you have to meet this person. That person met me. I was going to interview them for a podcast, and they said, "Oh my God, I have this job, I want you to apply to."
Nice.
So, I mean, it didn't, it all worked out, but that was kind of unique. Usually I'm doing my due diligence and finding the right job and applying and getting brought in because of my experience and my background. So, a lot of there are people who don't really enjoy the networking. It doesn't hurt, but let me say this. A lot of your network is who you already know. So that's what I would say. Rather than creating new networks, doesn't hurt. But, I've seen friends who got laid off or whatever, were available for a new job, and they reached out on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'm looking, appreciate any help." And I think that doesn't hurt.
Besides LinkedIn, are there any other resources that you know of that are sort of job forum places? Just curious.
LinkedIn is really the best professional platform. Other than that, it's job searching, niche job boards, So I think there are subgroups within LinkedIn. And as a recruiter, I used to search within, especially in high tech, there are certain programming areas, and I would just really search within those groups. You have to join first and be accepted. And then I would, let people know of jobs that were available. But I would say it's probably, other than Indeed as a job board, LinkedIn is the next best thing in terms of
and what about AI?
That I know of. What?
And what about AI? I have a friend who uses ChatGPT for pretty much everything.
Yeah, I mean, I use ChatGPT too in the job that I got hired for. I wrote speeches for my boss, and he sent me just in a little aside, I had to write a speech for him he was getting an honorary doctorate, and he sent me a speech. He's like, "Oh, what do you think about this?" I said, "That's really good." He said, "It's AI." I said, "Okay, I guess you don't need me." He said, No, I do." But it was phenomenal. You can, why not? Right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's a population right now that uses AI extremely effectively, and it works for them. I think I like it as a tool, but at the end of the day, I'm about like the personal touch as well. So I just feel like I need the knowledge from the work that I'm doing in terms of job searching, or if it can enhance your search, help me figure out how to make my resume better, help me. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the work. And that's just how I feel in general. I have a student worker that works with me on social media and our web page and all of that. A lot of times she's really useful, and I can hand things off to her when I don't have time. But a lot of times before I hand things off, I want to know how to do it so that I believe in management by knowledge, right? So it's kind of like with the AI thing. Sure, I could use AI to do a lot of things, and if it's going to make my life easier, but the bottom line hard work of digging in and doing searches is only going to benefit me. So, and that's probably why I I've had some longevity, and it's because I know how to do a lot of different things. And that's because I dig in and do things. And so I become a resource. So that's another reason. I want to be able to use AI effectively, but I also need to know how to do the thing.
True.
So I've got one more question before I pass it off to Wendy to do the final question, which is, in this post-pandemic world where people are still kind of working from home, but kind of not working from home because they're being forced back into the office, but where we also have ChatGPT, are you seeing anything new popping up in the unemployment / trying to get employed world? So is there anything new that's like the new LinkedIn or the new ChatGPT or the new something else, the new network that people should be looking out for?
I'm not in that world anymore, but people still reach out to me for the job search, and I do try to stay connected and see what's out there. I haven't seen necessarily anything new, even with the Gen Z generation. They're going about it the same way that we always have. So that's my experience right now. stretching across the generational spectrum. I haven't seen any changes or any new thing in that AI hasn't revolutionized that space in my experience. I would love to speak to the issue of references and reaching out to the olds, because I think this is one of the first things people worry about. Hopefully I can just take 2 minutes, but people were like, what about if I get fired? What about my references? A lot of times companies, well, you really shouldn't need more than 3 references, 4th as a backup. If they're asking you for 5, it's too much. If you really want the job, okay. But anybody that's asking you for 5, it's overkill. The way that I would position your company won't want to give you technically shouldn't give you, if they're competent, the people who are in charge, they shouldn't be giving you a bad review, because not a bad review, but a bad reference, because they could be sued. That they can get sued for. Yeah. So nobody wants a lawsuit, for that. And companies understand that if you try to sue them for laws that they're breaking, discrimination, that you're probably not going to win. In terms of preventing somebody from getting another job, that's a whole other, part of law. So what they can do is not answer any questions. There are ways to communicate. They can either not get back to. You don't have to put them down. If you give on the application, if you give someone other employers, that should do. If someone is pushing you to give your former employer or your former supervisor, the only thing that they should be doing is confirming, like in the background check, right? Confirming the dates you work there. And that matters because you don't want to lie about your sequence of events or whatever. So that's the only thing you might need them for. But in terms of reaching out to your old supervisor, you're not required to do that. And you can just gloss over that. Well, why can't I call them? Because, I would much, you asked me for references. These are the ones I gave you. So I just wanted to say that. In terms of being honest, it was important for me to let employers know. I told every single person that interviewed me, when it came up, why did you leave? Because people they're asking you because they want your judgment to see if you say, when I was recruited and people I remember one person I listened to them for 10 minutes because I was curious where it was going to go. It was clear that he wasn't treated well, but I said, you can't say this. This is what you need to say. My boss called me a social worker. So, and I would, I got it, and I wanted people to get a job. And there were people I thought, I'm not referring this person for a job. I don't need the money because they would be terrible. But so you really need to be clear. Just, it didn't work out. It's not a good fit. Okay. That's just that's good judgment. And it's also, people understand that. They say why. Just, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or the job changed, or management changed. Perfectly. Move on. Right. So if they push you more, just keep repeating that. If you're someone who, depending on you, so I think that should work for everybody. I said, I got fired and I need you to know why. I was, my boss was I don't remember the term. My boss was abusive, and that was just not acceptable to me. And I needed them to know, because again, I was confident I was going to be fine. I was also going to be starting my own business till I got recruited back to the job. But, it was important for me because I said, I need you to understand that let's just be clear. I'm not going to take a job where the boss is that person. Yeah. So I still got 2 job offers out of the 3 or 4 companies, and one still reached out to me to keep in touch after that. Because if you can speak to your excellence, it is what it is. So if you know that you can't go back to another situation, it's okay to be upfront, but I wouldn't dwell on it. I'd say a lot about it. Just be clear, to the point. That's what I would say.
Good point.
Excellent.
Good point. So at the end of all this, we'd like to ask our guests, because the name of the show is Things They Don't Teach Us. What do you wish you had learned about getting fired to set yourself up for success? What's the thing they didn't teach you?
that it's not the end of the world. That 3-month job was sort of a negotiation. And I felt like I had failed at something. And
Yeah.
that wasn't really the case. And it really affected my mental health for, for a long time. And the way I saw the world. It was a good dose of reality. It was early in my career to understand how the world worked, but it's not the end of the world. It's not just that, but yeah, I wish I had known that it happens to people all the time for reasons not of their doing, because that's how employment is set up to benefit the employer in the US with few protections. The other thing is, I do want to say this, unions give you there's a protocol they give you protection. It can still happen, but you get due process. If you're not in a union or not covered, you have virtually no protections. They can ask you to work 100 hours a week and you can drop dead and you're not protected. Unions protect you for the number of hours you work. And so people don't like unions, but they don't understand. They bring the humanity to employment situations.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. Derek, take it away.
No, I really appreciate all the energy and passion you bring to this topic, because again, it's something that we're not taught about, something that we're taught not to talk about.
Yeah.
And so, just not just the energy, but the knowledge, but also the way in which you connect all the dots, including dots I didn't even know about, is so important. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who will hear this and see this who will be like, wow, I didn't know about that. Or I knew about some of this, but not about some of the other ways in which I could conceptualize it. So, really appreciate that. And I hope your words do not fall on deaf ears. I hope they fall on many people's ears and they really take to heart. So thank you again for being here and for sharing with us.
I'm looking forward to promoting this on, even though I haven't recorded in a while, but sending people to your podcast to hear this.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. We appreciate that. And for those of you in the audience who are listening or watching, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send us any of those. We love to hear your questions or comments. They do drive us forward and drive our conversations forward. And we always pass them on to the guest. And then with that, good luck if you're job hunting, and if you're in a job, hope you enjoy it. And we will see you on the next episode of Things They Don't Teach Us. Take care.
Bye.